Hello, everyone. My name is Reese, and this is Where You Want to Be, the show where I take you with me around the world and use my knowledge about it to help you find your place within it. Today, we are talking about Prague. I'm going to give you my traveler's notes on the capital city of Czechia. Before we get into the history, I'm going to also talk about other stuff. I'm going to give you guys some facts to start, talk about the etymology, and then eventually go into my travel tips, and then just explain all stuff about the country that I can get for you guys. So with that being said, let's get into the etymology of Prague. So the name Prague is English, but the name Praha is the actual Czech name of the city, and that comes from a Slavic word. It's derived from the Slavic word pra, meaning threshold, most commonly. And the term threshold is used for this city for multiple reasons. So threshold, in this sense, kind of means gateway, as in the area around Prague is very significant. There's a lot of culture, but Prague is the epicenter of that. Prague was meant to be the city that is the gateway between the cultures that come before Prague from the west and end/start with Prague here. The heart of the Czech land is Prague. The heart of Czech history is Prague. So in order to get past Czech history and to really understand this area, the gateway is Prague. That's why it is a threshold. It's also considered to be threshold in the sense that it's a river ford because of the fact that it is on the Vltava River, and that passing through this river means you have to pass through Prague as one of the most significant cities on the river, and the history of it being very significant. So the history of the river affecting Prague is significant, and Prague affecting the river is significant. So there's no way to get past this sort of threshold being Prague without understanding the city and going through it, and that it all happens on the Vltava River. And then there's another explanation which connects to a legend. A figure named Princess Lebusier, hope I didn't butcher that, stated that there would be a city here that's fame reached far beyond its borders, reached to the stars. So there needed to be a threshold marked for where the city's castle would be built, and that's why threshold was used. As not for the other stuff I said, the legend suggests that threshold comes from this princess declaring this would be a famous city here, and that there needed to be a threshold marked for where the castle would be built to symbolize this city. And now for some facts. Prague is known as the City of 100 Spires. That is because in the Old Town alone, there are hundreds of different parts of the skyline that have different spires on top, which is kind of like a spherical triangle point at the top. It's very common in different parts of history and in Europe as a design for the area. So not only is there about 100-something here in just the Old Town, there's over 1,000 across the whole city. So even though it's the city of 100 spires, it's more like the city of over 1,000 spires. On top of this, the city is also known as having the world's largest coherent castle complex, which is Prague Castle, with a total area of about 70,000 square meters. It is absolutely massive. The design of it is very rugged, yet unique and still artistic, and I'll talk more about that later. Some other facts, you guys, is that beer is very, very significant to the people of Prague and to the Czechs in general. Czechia itself has the highest consumption of beer per capita in the entire world and has held that record for at least 30 years, continuously ranking at the number one spot, meaning that the average Czech has about one serving of bottled beer per day every single year. So because of that, beer is extremely cheap. Cheaper, in fact, than most water. If you were to go to a restaurant, there's a good chance that if you were to get a half liter of beer, it would be cheaper than a half liter of water. And that is a huge reason why Prague is such a party city, and the people here drink so much beer. And speaking of beer, there's a very unique experience that you can do in Prague. That experience is called a beer spa. You sit in an oak tub, and you get into hot water filled with beer ingredients. Those ingredients are yeast, barley, malt, and the process of being in hot water with those is supposed to help bone health and skin complexity and just really revitalize the body. So this is about a 60 to 90 minute experience you'd have here in Prague at a beer spa. And the whole time you're doing this, you usually get unlimited servings of Czech beer. So not only can you bathe in most of the ingredients to make beer, and you can drink beer away, you can also just enjoy yourself the whole time. So it's a very unique experience. Obviously, it's probably mostly touristy, but just one I thought was very unique. So those are my facts for you guys, and that brings me to the best part, which is the history. So without any further ado, and any more of me dilly-dallying, one more time, my name is Reese Garlinski. This is Where You Want to Be, and these are my traveler's notes on the capital of Czechia. This is Prague. You enjoy. Our origins begin around 550 BC, as the Iron Age came to a close. In the Vltava River Valley, there was a tribe of Celts that built small settlements on the land. They were called the Boii, which is why the land was originally called Bohemia. The start of Prague was further back, according to mythical history. According to legends, a king named Kruk settled his people in the area at a place called Vyšehrad. Vyšehrad still remains today, but is placed in the mid-900s by most historians. The Bohemian rulers resided in Vyšehrad during the 11th and 12th centuries. Under the later rule of Rudolf II, Prague was made to be a home for mystics and alchemists who pursued the philosopher's stone. There was also a huge presence of Freemasonry in Prague. All of this plays into the identity of Prague as a city that blends reality with the mythical world, spirits, and mythical stories. But now, back to the real history. In the late 400s CE, the Great Slavic Migration began, and Central Europe was slowly populated with Slavic tribes. At the end of the 800s CE, the Bolshevoi and Ludmila of the Přemysl dynasty moved their royal seat to Prague Castle Hill. The first stone structures were built here between 882 and 884 CE. The first structure was a church. The hill was selected because of its powerful location over a canyon and with easy access to bodies of water, like the Vltava. The Prague castle was developed at the end of the century in a smaller fortification. The dynasty was named for an old legend called Přemysl the Po Man. At the same time as this, there was the Great Moravian Empire. It controlled a lot of Central Europe and eventually ruled over Prague. Christianity took root at this time. In the 900s, the Přemysl dynasty established the Kingdom of Bohemia, and Prague was her capital. The first written mention of Prague happened in the late 900s CE, when an Arab traveler, Ibrahim ibn Yaqub, wrote about the castle, slave trade, and stoned walls of the city. Around this time, Vladislav II oversaw the creation of the Judith Bridge, which was created so people could cross the Vltava River. Old Town Prague was officially created in 1235 CE when the king, Stanislav I, merged local settlements into one basis for Prague. In 1215, all the Jewish subjects were stripped of their rights and sent to the corner of the city near a riverbank called Josefov. The Jews were not allowed to leave the Jewish quarter without permission. When they did, they were marked so that others could be aware of their presence. Jewish people were not given full freedom until 1782 under the leadership of Emperor Joseph II. But now to go back to the 12 to 1300s I was talking about, King Charles IV was a king of Bohemia that ascended to the title of Holy Roman Emperor in the mid-1300s. He ruled Prague from 1346 to 1378 and was named Holy Roman Emperor in the year 1355. He rebuilt the royal residence in Prague Castle, started the construction of St. Vilas Cathedral, and opened the first Central European university, which was Charles University. Of course, he also oversaw the construction of Charles Bridge being constructed, which connected Old Town, Stare Mesto, to lesser town Mala Strana in today's Prague. In 1348, he undertook an urban project to extend the city by 3.6 kilometers and added Charles Square to the new era. This arena, called Newtown, was designed with a lot of churches because Charles believed Prague was where the second coming of Christ would occur. All this expansion made Prague the third largest city in medieval Europe. The rule of Charles was the golden age of Prague and allowed the city to relish in the success of its legacy. The death of Charles IV launched Czechia into a lot of turmoil, but the Habsburgs inherited power and changed Prague for centuries. The Hussite movement. Prague was a center for the Hussite movement. This happened between 1419 and 1434. The successor to Charles IV, Wenceslaus IV, led the nation into an economic crisis, which was a motivation for the Hussite movement. The movement began to support the beliefs of Jan Hus, who was a Czech pastor burned at the stake in 1415. His supporters launched the Hussite Wars as the strong arm of the movement. Jan Hus was an adamant supporter of Protestantism. He was a scholar at the university and used his work to teach about Protestantism. The wars led to Hussites taking control of Prague when Wenceslaus IV died. The movement led to religious dualism between Protestants and Catholics for the first time in Europe. The wars left Bohemia and Moravia very weakened. Habsburg rule. It began in 1526 and saw the city heavily neglected. It was not developed in the way it was under Charles' lineage, and the Czech citizens wanted autonomy. There were demonstrations against the Habsburgs very often. The Habsburgs also reinstated the Catholic faith, which was also met with much aversion by the people. Prague was continuously suppressed and labeled a provincial town so that it would never outgrow the Habsburg heart, Vienna, even though Prague certainly had the potential to. In 1618, Habsburg representatives were thrown out of Prague by the Czech, and by thrown out, I mean it literally. 2 Catholic leaders and a secretary of Prague were thrown out a window in Prague Castle. This was a protest against the Habsburg rule and their strict enforcement of adherence to the Catholic faith. The fall was from 3 stories up, and all the men survived. Catholics claim that angels helped carry them down safely, while everyone else says that they fell into a pile of manure which saved them. Prague is the reason the word defenestration was created, because it was so common for people to be thrown out of windows in protest after events in Prague Castle. The lead up to the 1800s was very tumultuous for Prague. Decades of recovery from war were followed by rapid changes, all while dealing with the era of the Habsburg rule. The resistance and other challenges to the Habsburgs launched Europe into the 30 Years' War. Eventually, the Catholic Habsburgs defeated the Protestants from Bohemia in Prague. leading to the suppression of Protestantism. Harsh repressions followed, and many Czech nobles were executed in Old Town Square. But under the rule of Maria Theresa and her son Joseph II, Prague went under a lot of modernization. In the 1800s, old and new towns were given major sanitization processes. Old town buildings were torn down, and boulevards were reshaped so that the city could be ready for expansion. After the First World War, Prague became the capital of the sovereign non-Habsburg state of Czechoslovakia in 1918. The city was expanded under the Velká Praha plan, which meant the Great Prague. In World War II, Prague was one of the most fortunate cities because of the pre-conflict occupation. However, violence still hit the city. On February 14, 1945, the Valentine's Day bombings rained down on Prague from the American forces. Prague citizens resisted the rule of the Germans as hard as they could. In the war's final days, Prague's residents revolted against the German forces. The uprising began on May 5, 1945, and continued until May 9th, when the city was liberated by Soviet troops. Prague's Jewish community was heavily affected during the Second World War and experienced part of the Holocaust. Approximately 77,000 Czech Jews had their lives cut short, including the majority of them from Prague, the Soviet era. It officially began on February of 1948, and the Soviets fully took over, which ended the brief democracy that existed in Prague after World War II. Then there was the Prague Spring, which was a 1960s movement that used communist and democratic principles to unravel the tight hold of Soviet Russia on Prague and Greater Czechoslovakia. In 1989, peaceful protests swept across Czechoslovakia in order to end the Union, which represented the communist hold on Slovaks and Czechs. This was known as the Velvet Revolution. The movement was also against the political suppression and weak economy of the Soviet era. The revolution began with a peaceful student protest in Prague on November 17, 1989. The Velvet Revolution led to the peaceful separation of Czechoslovakia into two nations. This is known as the Velvet Divorce because there was no fighting needed to gain dual independence. The peace of the Velvet Divorce has created a healthy, open relationship between the Czechs and the Slovaks. The revolution is one of the greatest symbols of what peaceful movements can achieve. In the present tense, Prague has about 1.3 million residents and about 300,000 people commute to work in Prague during the work week. It's a city known for its culture, its history, its drinking ability, and its development as a major power in Central Europe. And that brings us to the end, where we get to shift from the overview of history into some of my things for historical sites. And now that we've talked about the history, I'm going to talk about some of the famous sites in Prague. The most famous is the astronomical clock. Mikuláš of Kadaň built the clock and then had his eyes poked out with a hot poker so that he could never make something so beautiful again. It was built in 1410 and has stood for over 600 years. Then there is Charles Bridge. Charles IV ordered Peter Palor to construct a bridge after his great success in building the St. Vitus Cathedral. The towers on each side were built for their toll collection and defending the entrance to Prague. The Old Town Tower on the right end of the bridge is seen as Central Europe's best Gothic tower. In the 1400s, another tower was built on the other side. There are statues of saints all over the bridge. The most famous is of Saint John Nepomuk, who was killed by King Wenceslas because he wouldn't expose his wife's confession. There is a spot on the statue that is worn because it is said to give good luck when rubbed, so it is the only part of the statue that is still gold while the rest has kind of rusted over. St. Vitus Cathedral. It took 600 years to finish the construction from the first structures that were laid here, all the way until the final touches. King John of Bohemia laid the foundation stone in 1344. Matthias of Arras designed the initial plans, but died suddenly in 1352. Peter Pilar, a young sculptor and woodcarver from Swabia, South Germany, succeeded Arras, and his sons completed the clock tower and transept in 1399. Construction was halted because of the Hussite Wars in 1419. Then the cathedral was damaged by fire and war. Eventually, it was left unfinished for centuries. But then, the final phase of construction was completed between the year 1873 and 1929. And our final site is Prague Castle. It started construction in the 800s CE and took centuries of development to fully complete. The crown jewels are here in the castle. The crown of Wenceslas is a 4-pound gold, and that's just the start. It has 6 of the 9 biggest sapphires in the world and the single largest ruby used for jewelry. The castle was built and expanded in the Romanesque style. Stone fortifications and the St. George Basilica were constructed, giving the castle a more permanent and fortified structure. During Habsburg rule in the 1500s, Prague Castle saw Renaissance-style updates. The Royal Garden was established, and the Belvedere, a summer palace, was built by Ferdinand I for his wife, Anne. The castle was remodeled in Baroque style with significant contributions from Austrian architects. Today, the castle stands as one of the most important parts of Prague and is truly a monolith to see. It is a reason it has that status as the biggest, and that is going to bring us to our travel tips. And as always, I'm going to start with the main one, which is if you're going to go and do things in Prague, book them early, but specifically go to Prague Castle early in the day and book everything in advance, including St. Vitus. So everything should be booked in advance. It just makes total sense. You want to do this during summer when everyone else is going or any other time of the year. It's still just best to book it in advance so that you avoid lines and avoid time wasted instead of seeing things. But what I think you should do is also go to Prague Castle early in the day, because then as you're walking back from Prague Castle, you get to go back through Old Town and then likely be near Charles Bridge at sunset, which is one of the coolest things I saw in all of Europe, as I'll show you guys here. And I encourage you to do that because there are not many sites that can top this. Another thing to do is to go out in Prague. Drinking in Prague is obviously a huge part of the culture. That's why beer is so cheap. And going out here is fun. There's great bar crawls to do. There's great bars to walk into. Just definitely go out at night and see that part of the culture as well, because it's very significant for Prague. I also recommend getting the famous Czech chimney cake called Tredlink at Tredlink and Coffee. I think this was the best one I had, and again, this could be a touristy thing. I just really enjoyed it. I think it's a fun thing to do here, even if it isn't the most authentic thing in the world. And even if it's more of a Hungarian thing, I had a really good one in Czechia, so why not enjoy it? And then my final tip would be to simply just drink your way through the city. Do it during the day, during the night, whatever it is. Just have beer as much as you can. The way the Czechs pour their beer is different. They like a lot of foam, because that's considered a good beer. They have so many different famous ones like Pilsner or Quell. Pilsners were invented here in Czechia, I believe in Prague specifically. So there's just so much of a beer culture here. Even if you're like a big craft beer guy in the United States or elsewhere, you should definitely just check out all the different kind of Pilsners and just Czech beer in general. It is so fantastic, and it's such a big part of the culture. And now that we've covered the history of Prague from a survey standpoint, I've gone through different landmarks and what they mean, their history, as well as giving you guys my travel tips of the great city. I very much hope you guys enjoyed and want to say that was all for me. It's been a while since I've been behind the mic, able to record episodes like this. And again, you've heard me say it before, I'm going to be consistent, but I mean it. I'm going to put out good episodes for you guys. I've been waiting for time to sit down and make quality content, because this is what I care about. I want to put out great things about the cities I've been lucky enough to visit, and luckily this is one of them. So I truly hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, there's a subscription button down there, and there's a like button down there. I appreciate you've pressed both of them, because it keeps me going, makes you want to keep making this stuff for everyone. So with that being said, my name is Reese. This was Where You Want to Be, and those were my traveler's notes on Prague. I hope you guys enjoy and come out to check out more. Have a good one.